The Holy Gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
On that day when evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Let us go across to the other side. Jesus invites his disciples to go with him across to the other side of a small sea. It's the Sea of Galilee, and it's not a very big one. It's probably a bit like the inland seas that we have, the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario and Lake Erie and Lake Superior. It's probably a little bit like the kind of lakes that we have that have small waves, but then periodically have big winds that can come up and actually sink a ship. There are a lot of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. When I was a child, there were a lot of headlines about little robot submarines going down under the sea to look at the shipwrecks and to find all the things that had been either destroyed during the War of 1812, when there was a war on the Great Lakes and there were naval battles. But then there were also a few shipwrecks that happened because of the kind of weather you could get in the winter. And when people experience that kind of a gale, and that's the kind of thing it was a big, quick wind, it's sort of a panicking type of experience. And sailors have written about these types of gales, even that can happen on small bodies of water, for centuries. The types of gales that blow up and that make you feel like there is nothing that could possibly be secure because everything is moving. So even on a big boat, everything is moving. There's, maybe anything that's on the deck would start shifting side to side, and people would not be able to get a hold of something to keep them safe. It's the kind of experience that some people now have who never sail at all. The kind of experience that people have when they are anxious. It can feel like dying. There are millions of people who experience this kind of anxiety, the type of thing that hits you as though it's a wave, and you cannot get a hold of anything. And the only way out of it is to touch some part of your body and to get grounded again where you are. This is the kind of experience that the disciples were having in their very small boat with Jesus, and that the people around them were having as well. I forget, as some of us do because we focus in on Jesus and the disciples in their boat, that there were other boats with them on the Sea of Galilee. There were other boats that were all rising together and going down on these big waves. And all of the people in those boats did not have the physical presence of Jesus in the boat with them to make them feel safe. And yet it didn't even make the disciples feel safe to have Jesus in the boat with them. They experienced this kind of fear that overwhelmed them. And yet, when they talked to Jesus about it, he didn't actually talk to them in return. he did what he does. He solved the problem without getting engaged with whatever they were afraid of. He stood up, he rebuked the wind and said, "Peace, be still," which is the same thing that he would say to us in our fear and our anxiety. It's the same thing that would have worked for the people in the other boats as well. Peace, be still calms the storm for every person on the Sea of Galilee and saves them. And then in the dead calm, Jesus turns to his disciples and says, "Why are you afraid?" Because of course there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. It's calm. Why are you afraid? They're still afraid because their bodies and their minds have taken over and are simply reacting. They're reacting because our bodies and our minds don't turn off that kind of fear so quickly. We don't give up what we're afraid of simply because God says, "Peace, be still," even though we at some level know that God can calm whatever is harming us. The disciples in the boat are afraid because they have reason to be. They are picking up the signals of the natural world that they are used to, that when there is a storm and you are being tossed about as a sailor, you are likely to die. And so their bodies have given them all the signals that they need to survive. That's the kind of fear that is justified. In a situation where the boat is getting swamped, it's justified. But then when the boat is calm and they're still afraid, that's the problem. That's the deeper problem that Jesus is trying to get them to understand. There are correct and righteous times to be afraid. But when we call upon God and God calms it for us, continuing to be afraid is not productive. Continuing to be afraid simply because we're used to it and our bodies have taken over and we're having a psychosomatic response to everything that's around us is no longer a good thing. There is a dead calm around Jesus, and the disciples are still afraid. That's the kind of fear that makes it impossible to move forward. So here they are in their boat, in the dead calm, not moving anywhere. And in order to continue their journey to the other side, they will have to stop being afraid. They've gotten through it. They've done the right thing. They've called on Jesus. They've said, "Don't you care?" Jesus has shown that he cares and calmed the storm. And now they're kind of just floating in the dead calm. They and all the other boats. They could just relax in this calm place. They could just enjoy no longer being afraid. But Jesus knows at some level they still are afraid. And that in order for them to continue their journey to the other side, they will have to have faith. They will have to have faith that the waves will not come back and swamp them. They will have to have faith that where they are going is where they want to go. And they will have to have faith that Jesus isn't going to jump out of the boat sometime and leave them. All of these things are required for them to overcome the residual fear of being in danger. This is the kind of thing that humans go through over and over again in our lives. They're called transitions. They're called existential moments, times when we realize we could die. And sometimes, unless we're the kind of people who have anxiety disorders, and then we feel like we could die all the time. That's a different thing. These are healthy moments. The moments when we realize we're alive, when we could have died, but didn't. Many people have gone through that over the last few months. And our churches, the two of them, are still going through it. We could have died. Jesus, don't you care that we're perishing? Don't you care that there are only 6 people in this room? What if we don't get any more people back? What if it doesn't work? What if this thing we're doing, where we're going, isn't the right place for us to be going to? Jesus says, why are you still afraid? Have you still no faith? When we know who Jesus is, we can trust that he is leading us to a safer shore. We can trust that Jesus, who's in the stern of the boat when the waves come over, knows that the world is dangerous, knows that we need other people, and we need resources, we need money, we need shelter, we need all the things we need to live, all the things that God has made on the earth for us to live with. And yet we still worry. We still would rather stay in the dead calm in the middle of the Sea of Galilee than keep going forward. You see, in order for these boats that are in the dead calm after the storm that Jesus has made go away, in order for them to keep going, what do they need? They're going to need another wind. They're going to need something else that will move them forward. And as soon as that wind picks up again, I'm sure that the disciples and the people in the other boats would start to feel a little afraid. If you've been on a boat, you know that they never stop moving. Even in the calm, you're always kind of moving around and feeling unsettled. And then when the wind picks up, even if it's not a very big wind, even if you're on a very small body of water, it starts to feel like everything is coming apart inside you. I'm sure that since the disciples were fishermen and had spent a lot of time on boats, they weren't entirely terrified of a normal wind. But right after a big storm, right after it seemed like they were all perishing, they might have been a little jittery about letting the wind take them somewhere again. If you're feeling that way in some part of your life, in your personal life because something has really changed and unsettled you, if you're feeling that way in your church life because really everything has been unsettled for 18 months, and even before that for Christ Church and St. Martin's, because you didn't really know how the other side was going to turn out, and we still don't exactly, what you can do about it is, of course, connect to Jesus. I don't know if you'll say something like, "Don't you care that I'm perishing?" Maybe, if you feel unsettled enough, that's what you'll want to say to God. And that's okay. Jesus doesn't rebuke them for saying, "Don't you care that we are perishing?" Jesus tries to get them going again by saying, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" But only after calming everything, saving them, giving them a moment of calm. So if you look for Jesus, and then you look for that moment of calm, and then you accept that you're going to have to let the wind push you again, you're going to have to allow yourself to go through the next phase of that transition until you get to the other shore. That's what Jesus is telling the disciples they will have to do over and over again in their lives. That's what Jesus is showing them by his presence, by not getting right up when the wind kicked up and stopping it before they could feel any fear. Jesus allows them and us to go through these unsettling times in order to show us that the calm times are also transitions, and that we have to keep going forward. There isn't any other choice. And yet, we can remember always and everywhere, even the wind and the sea obey Jesus. Even the wind that is guiding us and pushing us and maybe making us feel like we're being pushed at too fast a speed for our liking, even that is under Jesus' control. We are not people who believe that nature controls us. We are not people who believe that the way the world works is the way it's meant to work all the time. We are people who believe that God has a purpose underneath everything we can see and experience. And that the way to go forward with God is always to keep reconnecting with the one who is with us in the boat. One of my predecessors at St. Martin's had put up a small boat in the nave at St. Martin's. And if you go there to visit, or if you're a person who's been there before, you'll see there's this little ship at the end of the nave. And of course, it's in the nave because the term nave has to do with boats. We're in this boat, this upside down boat, and we're feeling safe inside it. And that's even more true at St. Martin's because the way that their nave works, like Navy, the way that their nave works looks more like a boat even than the one here at Christchurch does. We'd have a pretty pointy bottom to our boat if we were to go out on the ocean with it. Theirs looks more like a boat, and this is traditional. It's traditional because it reminds us that when we are in this boat with Jesus at church, we are always safe. But there is also a tradition, and I learned that it comes from the Balkans and from Northern Europe, of putting a ship at the end of the nave. And the idea is that when you exit the nave, you're still in the boat. You're still journeying somewhere with Jesus. And you still can call on him to calm your storms, to guide you where you need to go. There is this tradition in the church because it's always been true that people in times of transition, in times of difficulty, have struggled with this question. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And they've always needed to be reminded that yes, Jesus cares that we are perishing. But he doesn't necessarily stop the process. He just keeps us safe and moving forward as we journey with him. So, if you go to St. Martin's, look for the little boat. And if you're not going to St. Martin's, imagine the little boat when you leave here today. Imagine that you are in that tiny boat with Jesus on a much bigger sea than you can ever know, but that he has the power over all the things that threaten to swamp you. And your transitions will be much better.